Lai ge dan lu dan no jing ge zhu bon da dan mi ke nan dan zhuo wa kun ji zhan nan ji zang ba dan ji ge du da ji zhu den do. In the language of the gods, Nagas, and Yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Welcome everybody to Buddhist Center. Now that everybody can hear me and understand me, I'm hoping, that, this blessing of the Sanjamula allows you, in whatever realm you're in, to be able to hear this Dharma, and you're led to the truth of suchness somehow or another by the words found in this teaching today. And we're so fortunate that this teaching today is about the stages of the path that lead every single being to the state of Buddhahood. We're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And we know that this is a real jewel in the world, a jewel that's, can grant every wish that we want. And we know that when we think of what we wish for and what all sentient beings wish for, it's to be free from suffering and to have the highest amount of happiness possible. And it's through relying upon this Dharma found in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that we can achieve those incredible goals. So we've won the lottery over and over again every time that we can read a word or two or a paragraph or a page of Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, because it contains the information and the only information that will allow us to produce the ripening and liberating paths within our continuum to become Buddhas. So now that I've invited all sentient beings here to be a participant in listening to this Dharma, the truth of the Dharma, the truth of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings on the beings of three capacities, where he's really just expanded upon Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment and shown us really how to work with these beings of three capacities within the context of the Abhisamalamkara and within the context of the profound view and extensive deeds lineage. So we're so fortunate to be able to be here. So now you as a participant, imagine that you invite, so I as a teacher invited all sentient beings to come here to be able to learn how to get rid of afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. Now imagine that you too invite all sentient beings to be your guests, leaving out none, imagining all the beings of the different realms of cyclic existence, the hell realms, the hungry ghosts, the animal realms, the human realm, demigods and gods, and think about abandoning these childish notions where we differentiate between different beings and have bias between different beings. And we see that when we look at every type of being there is and every relationship that we currently have in this life, those who took care of us when we were vulnerable in this life may have had other relationships with us before in other lives where they were our enemies. And those who we consider distasteful in this life, we may have loved more than anyone in the universe in a previous life. So we see we've merely forgotten these things and how all beings have taken care of us. So these labels, these exaggerations where we're not equally willing to benefit others need to be abandoned if we want to become a Buddha. So here we start to condition our mind, familiarize our mind with the abandonment of bias by inviting every single sentient being here, whether in this life they're friends, enemies, or neutral or strangers to you. All of these realms are strangers. We don't even know where they are. I don't even know what these beings look like unless I go by the guide of the Lam Rim of description of the 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, surrounding hells, hungry ghosts, and even some animals I can't even understand. They're hidden to what I'm able to know. So I have to start creating the causes within my mind, the conditions within my mind to be able to think more broadly. So likewise, everyone who wants to have freedom from suffering and have complete bliss has to begin by creating this fertile ground within your mind for the arisal of an eventual attitude which would put all beings' needs before your own, and like a bodhisattva does, because he or she knows this is the only way to Buddhahood. So we start to emulate the great beings in our practice, and by emulating the great beings, we are creating more virtue in every moment of that emulation, because we're putting our minds to objects of observation that are so vast, all sentient beings in the universe, and we're doing this for them. We're engaging in this practice to be able to free them all from the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, because this is the only way to my own bliss. And my own reliability. And until I get rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, I'm not reliable. And until you get rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience, you're not reliable. We are all equally important and equally have the ability to mature. And the maturity has to take place for the reliability to be there. And the maturity starts taking place with baby steps, where we're willing to start to invite all beings and go against the grain of our kind of normal attitudes, these kind of effective emotional minds that we have, that we feel differently about certain types of beings because of our inappropriate attention, because of thinking in ways that derive from a self-grasping ignorance. So everything is just messed up from that place. So invite all hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods here to be your guest, to be able to hear this teaching, because you know they want what you want, and they've been so kind to you in the past. The only way that you could really, truly repay their kindness would be to let them in on the secret that you've learned. Not everybody gets to learn this in every life. It's very rare that we have this Dharma in this life. So just imagine you're letting these beings in on this secret, and it's only a secret because we have so many obstructions that don't allow us to understand reality. And we have this innate grasping at everything as being inherently existent that just drives us and drives us and drives us. So we bring all sentient beings here to be our guest. You lead them here. Imagine you're leading them in prayer. Imagine they're doing all the things you're doing. If you're doing a 7-limb prayer, you're imagining that you're all prostrating together. You're all making offerings together. You're all confessing downfalls together. You're all rejoicing together. You're all requesting the Buddhas to teach together. You're all requesting the beings not to leave this world. You're all dedicating virtue together. And whenever we're engaging in practice, the more beings we connect with, the more vast the virtue in each moment becomes. If we do it just for ourselves, it's a very selfish motivation. It doesn't allow our minds to open up in that way that's necessary for us to be Buddhas. So we start opening them up, forcefully prying them open by these exercises. Now, all sentient beings are here. Now, we're going to engage in a practice together to get our minds calmer, to get our minds more realistic, from which we can start to practice the Dharma. These are exercises that you can do in your daily life. Maybe you already do things like this. You maybe do things that are more effective for you than this. This isn't something that's in stone. These are just some exercises that I found helpful in my life that have been passed down through a holy lineage to me that I want to share with you. So I feel so fortunate today to be able to share this. So now let's get into the 7-point Vairakana posture, imagining that you and all sentient beings are in the 7-point Vairakana posture. What is the difference between a sentient being and a Buddha? A sentient being at least has obstructions to omniscience. You don't become a non-sentient being technically, the way sentient being is used, until you are a Buddha. So even beings on the 10th Bodhisattva ground are still sentient beings until they are hit the resultant ground of Buddhahood. So we all are here, all sentient beings are here, and even those 10th ground bodhisattvas have something more to do to get rid of the remaining obstructions to omniscience that are there. You know, the small, subtle ones that are left for that being. There's a step for them to take, in which just we're imagining that whatever we're doing, we're helping them to take that step. We're helping the hungry ghost and hell being to take the next step to be able to really do the things that they'll need to practice. And we know that the Buddha achieved the mind that aspires to enlightenment in a hell realm when he developed compassion for a being he saw who was struggling to drag a cart. So we see that everyone has this potential wherever they are to be able to evolve. So we think in realm, we think all the way from the bottom to the top in terms of evolution, because if you are not a Buddha, you haven't woken up, open with omniscience. Only the Buddha has done that. And we will all become Buddha because we have this Buddha nature. So let's all together get into the 7-point Vairocana posture, get our minds into a realistic, calm place from which we can grow virtue, grow motivation, learn to combat and harm the self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to our self-centeredness, our self-cherishing attitude. So this is what the name of the game is getting rid of those two things that make everything awful for us over and over and over again in cyclic existence. So 7-point Vairocana posture, and we're going to calm our minds down by focusing on the breath, and we're going to do some fixed meditation. There's analytical and meditation and fixed meditation. Analytical meditation, you take a subject and you look at it from every single direction possible. Is it this? Is it that? Could it not be this? Could it be that? And really, really analyze it. You do this with emptiness. What is it? Emptiness. Is it empty of existence? No. Is it empty of something else? Yes. It's empty of inherent existence. What is inherent existence hypothetically, if it could exist? How do I take it apart? So this is analytical meditation. Fixed meditation is where you take something specific and you only allow your mind to focus on that fixed object. Normally you would start with just maybe, the breathing, or maybe whatever your mind works best with, just maybe a front generation form, and just trying to get, more and more fixed on the object. But here we're just using a few different techniques. You have to go, and find out what works best for you and receive, personalized instructions once you get to really into this stuff from a meditation instructor. But what we're doing today, and a qualified one, not just anyone, someone who's done this and done this and done this and can help you. And not every teacher who's done this is the right teacher for you. So really just take these as exercises, and then look in the great texts like the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment and Kamala Shila's Stages of Meditation for more instruction on how you would gain these 9, go through these 9 stages to actually get shamatha, to actually get calm abiding. So this fixed meditation, we're just trying to dull down conceptuality, focusing on the breath, and we're making sure that's our focal object. And then we're going to add, a front generation form of the Buddha. So our focal object will be breathing in and out, counting the breath, and then a front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni about an arm length away, about the size of our thumb, about eye height. And we're imagining this with our mind. We're not trying to make our eyes hallucinate this. We're trying to get our mental consciousness to a place where our sensory consciousness is shut off, and we're using this mind to merely focus on the breath, and as an observer. So the mental consciousness is doing the work, observing the breath, and the mental consciousness is of looking at Buddha Shakyamuni in the mind. So the counting of the breath, and then the fixing on the object of Buddha Shakyamuni is all done with the mental consciousness. So let's do that for a moment. Get our minds calmed down. Buddha Shakyamuni is the Buddha of our time. You've seen many forms. For any of you who are new, just imagine Buddha, breathing and counting, and imagine Buddha in front of you. And it doesn't have to be detailed or anything, just kind of taking a moment to do that and hone in on the being we will become, calm our minds down, and start to learn how we could get shamatha. So this is pretty cool that we can do these little exercises and they'll leave these imprints in our mind, no matter what level we're at. If you're at a higher level, you know exactly what to do right now and how to abandon the distractions of, the mind moving around, and to abandon the extractions of your mind being sleepy, and bringing, the focal object back with, mindfulness by catching it with a spy of introspection. So I encourage you all to find out, if you don't already know, exactly what that means, but this is a springboard into those kinds of things. Okay, breathing in and out, counting, in the front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni. And again, you're with all sentient beings. We're so fortunate to be here today, to be able to hear these incredible teachings found in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. We find all of Lord Buddha's teachings summarized in this incredible text. How many of the billions of beings, human beings in this world, will get to hear the truth of suchness today on this Sunday? And we're so fortunate. Really rejoice in this fact. Have a sigh of relief that there's some truth in a world of lies and deception. Here you are on a Sunday finding out about truth, an incontrovertible truth, a truth that you don't rely on because somebody told you it was true, a truth that you will discover for yourself by relying on this flawless logic and reasoning. We're so fortunate that we aren't asked to have blind faith by the Buddha. We're asked to discover what he discovered and confirm it by direct discovery. All of these reasons are confirmed by direct discovery. And this is what's so amazing. We will all directly discover what Buddha Shakyamuni discovered. So this is music to Buddha Shakyamuni's ears. And imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni now, who was in the front generation, kind of static and fixed, explodes into an animated state. And Buddha Shakyamuni is now completely animated and had been containing the entire merit field. And you imagine that the merit field just goes, almost just fills in like in the space in front of you, if that makes sense. You know, Buddha Shakyamuni, there's this bliss, this kind of that happens, and then there's an eruption. Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation has been containing all of the enlightened beings, all of the merit field, and then all of a sudden you just see the merit field fill in the space in front of you. Or if you're doing it in your individual practice, the way that we will go next, where we say the individual names, you can imagine that they're filling in as you're saying the names. Lama Tsongkhapa would call upon the names, and they would arrive in front of him, and wouldn't until he said that, in these individual names, the 35 Buddhas. I mean, they would all arrive in front of him as he called their individual names. So however is best for you to do it for your own mind. But these are some other techniques that you can use. So now you imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is so animated and so happy here today with us. Whenever we call the Buddhas, they're here. We just have karma that's messing with us, that doesn't allow us to see things the way that they really are. We have these imprints that are embedded with the messed up kind of starting point of grasping at true existence. And it's a serious issue. And that's why we have to circle in samsara. So Buddha's here. Now the entire merit field's here. Now imagining all those holy enlightened beings, anyone you consider an enlightened being. I won't be able to name all those beings that you consider enlightened beings, but I can name some that we have very, very close connections to, that we have in common. That you can use as your starting point and fill in your merit field, who you find to be those enlightened beings. Now imagining His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, in the space in front of us, Chen Rezig, who's come to our world to be able to share with us the truth of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings in such a clear way, and still teaching in this world. We're so fortunate. Imagining Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, my root teacher, many of your root teacher. I spent so many 25 years with this holy being. I know what it means to him to see the Lamrim tradition carried on. He asked me to do this. So I personally imagine, and then you can imagine, knowing these facts, how happy and the kind of glow of radiance Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, Lord Vajradhara in person, inseparable from Aryatara, would feel seeing what's going on today. Just the love in Rinpoche's eyes when he would look into my eyes, the care he had, caring, and the patience that he had for me. I see all of that when I visualize my Lama and see him as an inseparable from Aryatara and any of the other deities that I meditate upon. Now imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Demolocha Rinpoche, Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, Umzola Geshe Aga, Geshe-la Tenzin Ladrin, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Chado Rinpoche, Jeffrey Hopkins, all the beings you consider holy beings. Imagine them in the space in front of you. Imagine the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya Sangha and Vasubandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimukta Sena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha and Salimpa and Atisha, imagining these holy beings, the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nargajuna and Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Chandrashita and Baba Vega, imagining Kamala Shila, all these holy beings, and again, imagining Lama Salimpa and Atisha, knowing that they were holders of these two lineages in various ways. And Atisha brought these lineages together into a really concise pathway so we could integrate all of these things together with not only the sutra teachings, but the tantric teachings. We're so fortunate. So we imagine these beings of both of these lineages that we're so connected to, the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara and Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Lotsawa Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa. We're so fortunate to connect with these beings in terms of lineage, in terms of instruction. Lama Tsongkhapa said that there's no other realization of the emptiness of the mind than what Milarepa, the Jetsun Milla, realized. So we know that all of these teachings are in common if they work. Many of these instructions that are pointed out over the hundreds and hundreds of years are not correct, and we have to find the gold and make sure that what we're practicing is correct. And we're so fortunate these beings have come to really shine magnifying glasses on the pure Dharma. Imagining Lord Atisha passing down the Lamrim lineage to Drone Tompa, a lay person. Imagine that. We're so fortunate that this happened, and this lay person was so qualified and had renunciation and bodhicitta and carried forth this Lamrim doctrine that we have in our hands today, so we can practice and become Buddhas. Imagining now Drone Tompa and all of the three old Kadampa lineages, all of the holy beings of the Nyingma, such as Padmasambhava Sakya, Sakya Kunga Nimpo, and Sakya Pandita, Kaju, all the Karmapas, and the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtapje, Jelsipje, Panchen Sanandrapa, Bashus Juji Jetson, Jayan Sheba, Gonja Jimmy Wambo, Janja Rupi Dorje, Jet Sumpa, imagining the Purba all of these holy beings, all of these commentators, seventh Dalai Lama that we're so connected to, and we rely upon these things whether we know it or not, because we study the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and because we've had these holy lamas who've studied these commentaries on it, and commentaries on the perfection of wisdom, and commentaries on the tenets, and commentaries on the profound view of emptiness, of the Madhyamaka Prasangika. We're so fortunate to be connected to these beings. If we've had all of these beings mentioned, if we've had really qualified geshes in our life, if we've had really qualified kempos in our life, then we're so connected to these beings in so many different ways. And we know that these beings continue to emanate in different ways in order to bring beings to the truth of suchness. So the truth of suchness is the truth of suchness. And now, however it's labeled, if it's the accurate truth of suchness, then it doesn't matter if you're calling it the old tradition, the new tradition, the somewhat old tradition. If it's pointing at the thing that's accurate, the abandonment of the grasping at true establishment, if the target is inherent existence and the grasping at things as having inherent existence, then no matter what lineage we're talking about, Nyingma, Kaju, Sakya, Galu, whatever Indian tradition we're talking about, profound view lineage, extensive deeds lineage, we always have to check if the target is truly being shot at. And we're so fortunate to be in contact with all of these holy lineages that know exactly what the target is. And that's the self-grasping ignorance. And that self-grasping ignorance gives rise to a self-cherishing attitude. And the reversal of the self-cherishing attitude is where we begin, and we can then build upon that and become bodhisattvas. So it's so amazing that we have the techniques that are presented by all of these holy beings to do exactly what we need to do if these are our goals. So we're so fortunate to have this. Imagining now all the beings of the highest Yoga Tantra, Performance Tantra, Action Tantra, all of these holy beings in the space in front of you, the 35 Buddhas, the protectors of the three capacities, imagining Vaishravana and imagining Kala Rupa, Dharmaraja, imagining Mahakala and Palden Lamo, all of the Dharmapalas, imagining all of these incredible beings in the space in front of you that protect the Dharma, protect the students of the Dharma, protect you and I. If we engage in the study of the Dharma and the practice of the Dharma, we can feel like we have guardian angels around us at all times, because they had promised the Buddhas that they would be our guardian angels, they would be our protectors. And we have to know that that commitment is true, because these beings are enlightened beings themselves, and they don't make commitments that they can't keep. They didn't make commitments on the Bodhisattva path that they weren't going to keep. And that's what's so amazing. The Bodhisattva says, I will become your most reliable guide. The Bodhisattva says, I will become perfect. And this isn't just some thing that says, I will win the lottery without any basis. This is the Bodhisattva saying this because he or she knows that every single ingredient necessary to make that happen is right here. We're so fortunate. So now we have all sentient beings here. We've invited as our guests, all hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigods, and gods are here as our guests. And all of the enlightened beings who've crossed the 10th Bodhisattva ground, and our Buddhas are all here. Now that we're all here, now that every kind of being in the universe is here, sentient being and Buddha, this is it. These are the two divisions of possible beings in the universe. Now that everyone's here, before we recite the Heart Sutra, let's just take a short look together. You know, you've led all sentient beings here. Imagine that they're all hearing exactly what these words are. And again, as we said, from the Sanchen Molam, from the King of Aspirations, right when we started the teaching, in their own individual languages, whatever it is, and hearing it in the way that they need to, so that they can get rid of whatever obstacle they have to move forward. So this is what we're imagining. These are the kind of things that we're imagining when we're doing our practice. So before we start the Heart Sutra, let's talk about what the content of the Heart Sutra is. We've been looking at Jeffrey Hopkins' Meditation on Emptiness for quite a few classes right now, and learning how we begin to meditate upon emptiness. How do we do such a thing? There's so many misinstructions on meditating on emptiness that just lead you to just blank. And this is something that Kamalashila was invited to Tibet to kind of, roar against, this idea of emptying the mind is emptiness. And so here, Jeffrey Hopkins was so kind to us to take Khenser Lekten's words, Khenser Ngawan Lekten's words, one of the Dalai Lama's teachers of emptiness, and the fifth Dalai Lama's words, and Janja's words, and Jayan Sheba's words, and Kirtapje's words, Ling Rinpoche's words, and then put them all together into a package, make a book called Meditation on Emptiness, and begin it with how a yogi meditates from yogis. If you haven't seen this, I would suggest that you start to familiarize yourself with it just a little bit. Even though it's kind of such difficult, heavy material, it shows you how to not be a nihilist right away. And you're intelligent, you've gone to school, you have degrees, you can read this stuff, So when we start to meditate, we see first what is going on. What does the I appear as? How does the I appear to me? So we're not trying to analyze it in any way whatsoever. We're just seeing how the I naturally appears. Does it appear as something separate, or is it something that's just fused, kind of like this with the mind and the body? So from the very start, you start to say, Jeff, I feel like this concrete, singular thing when I don't analyze it. I just feel it. I just experience it. I have this awareness of this way that seems to be objectively existent. I'm not analyzing it yet, but then when I think about it, I come out of that natural kind of feeling of the way it appears. It appears like this concrete, solid thing. But the minute that I start to get out of the natural experience, it starts to fall apart, because I now begin to separate the I in some way from this thing that it seems like it's fused with. So it starts to disrupt right away. Can this I appear to be self-established? if its appearance is indifferentiably mixed with the mind and the body. It would seem logically impossible for it to be self-established and yet mixed. So this is where you start to have a tetsum, they say, and you start to question whether the way that it appears to you is accurate or not. Does this tally with reality? Does the naturally appearing I, and then of course the yogi, it says in this text, then starts to shoot this kind of logic at hundreds of different objects, like, oh, how does this thing appear to me? How does this sandal appear to me? It appears objectively existent, just naturally. And we come to find out that this is a real problem. We neutrally all the time see everything embedded with this kind of inherent existence, this objective, intrinsic, inherent existence. And we really don't analyze it at all. It just appears this way to us. So we're trying to combat something that appears naturally a certain way to you and you and you and my neighbor and everyone else. We would all concur that it appears this way. So what we're fighting against is really, since beginningless time, myself and my neighbor and everyone else, if we're all who we appear to be, have been thinking and believing this kind of innate idea that these things are the way that they appear. So we have to see if it's true or not. I'm not saying I know it's not. I'm saying that I engage in analysis to see if it's true or not. So the next thing we do is say, okay, this appears to be objectively existent. It seems to be singular, permanent, unitary, independent, all those great words, autonomous, substantially existent, all those fancy things. What does all that mean? It seems like it really from its own side stands up. So does it stand up from its own side? This is the real question we have to, the yogi, would do. So Jeff, who's not a yogi yet, wants to be a yogi, wants to, start to have these kinds of realizations. So I engage in the meditations that they do. So I see, okay, is the I something that is mind and separate from the mind and body, or something that is one with the mind and body? You have to start to see. Is there something that can be found? It must be inherently the same entity as the aggregates, the aggregates, 5 aggregates. We find the, physical and mental aggregates, those 5. So it has to be inherently different from the aggregates or the same. If we're going to find inherent existence, those are only 2 places we're going to be able to find it. So we have to see if in those 2 places, one with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates, this inherently existent, objectively existent, intrinsically existent, selfhood of person in this case is there. So there's a way to expand upon the 4 essentials, which is identifying an object of negation, and then seeing if it's one or separate from the aggregates inherently. And if it's not inherently one or separate from the aggregates, then it's not inherently existent. So there's a way to kind of even expand upon that further with the 7-fold reasoning, the analysis of the chariot. So this is what we've started to talk about. And we've been, not talking about chariots. We've been talking about the I, but when we study Madhyamaka Prasangika, we see that the I is merely designated on its basis, so we see that, this I and the collection in terms of the, these aggregates and the, chariot and its parts, it's the same analysis. So if you're familiar with Chandrakirti's analysis of the chariot, this is, we're talking about the analysis of the I in terms of it, the subject chariot, the subject I, so self of person, chariot is self of phenomena. So we're trying to be real specific. But so we start to do this analysis and we see if, the I inherently exists as being the aggregates. Okay, it's not that. Is it being an entity other than the aggregates? No. Is it the base of the aggregates? No. Is it inherently being based on the aggregates? No. Is it inherently possessing aggregates? No. Is it being just the composite of the aggregates? No. Is it the shape, my shape? Is the I my shape? No. So we start to analyze these things. It's not such a simple meditation to do. And that's why we've started to read some of this text where we, okay, we take each of these 7 steps of this analysis, and we see if the I holds up as being, mind and body. Is it aggregates? And one with the aggregates somehow. And then the second step, is it something separate, something different, something tade, something not cheap? So these are the things that we, start to analyze, beginning with, is it, one with the mind and body? Is it the mind and body? And we see that, why would you need an I if it was, you would just say aggregates. Here's, you start to see, the Prasangika loves, like, well, let me tell you something stupid. Let me show you the consequences. Let me take you to in absurdum. Let me show you something absurd about, what that is. And it's so cool that there's such playfulness within this in the consequence school. And it sometimes comes off if it's, Giant Shiva or Ngawam Pelden or, some of the other very gruff, every pretty gruff ones, Janjarilpi Dorje, gruff ones, it's sometimes even like a little bit, just playfully, a little more than playful, just kind of like idiot. And this is the kind of thing my mind needs, because, what was great, Geshe Dorje Damdu said, that when we're reading texts and we see the opponent, and we're always pointing at, oh, that's the opponent. They're the nihilists. They're the Sankhya. They're the fill in the blank. No, you need to look at you're the opponent, because you hold these views. And until you understand what these views are that are being negated, you'll never even know you're holding them. So you're the opponent. Your self-grasping ignorance is the opponent. Your lack of being middle is the opponent. So it's pretty cool when we start to read texts and we put ourselves in the shoe of the opponent and see that their positions are quite tenable. And it's easy to blow down a straw man or woman. In this case, a lot of straw men blowing down, those darn Samkhya's, and there must be poop and bread if they believe that there's a result in the cause. But when we start to look at the philosophy more clearly and we see, oh, this sounds like Dolpopa. And wait a second, this sounds like highest yoga tantra. And then we start to say, well, what's different? Then we see what we really hold on to. And if we're anywhere near the middle in any of the, sutra teachings, tantra teachings, we like to think we're all, in the middle in the tantra, And I say to myself, I can't wait to enter the small scope. And this isn't without, day and night, I want to get out of the lower realms, But I think I'm going to do some practicing of, the resultant vehicle. But that doesn't mean we don't, try to get these imprints. But it's just true, right? So if the I was the aggregates, then the aggregates die. There's no I. That's it. This is the nihilist view, that, there's no continuity that's going to be found, that would just be it. But so the memory of former rebirths, it's not possible. You couldn't remember a former rebirth because there's no continuity. They'd be just an inherently kind of different, unrelated. That's a bad word to use, inherently. Just to be an unrelated kind of situation. So anyway, these are some of the points that are made around that. I just want to do a little bit of this analysis, and I encourage you to then go into this analysis, because we're teaching Lam Rim 6 sufferings today. But before we read the Heart Sutra, I always want to go over what is being negated here. So we know that there's a Jeff, there's an I that's talking to you right now. But we have to see what the mode of existence of the Jeff that's talking to you right now. When we find dependent origination becomes the sign or reason for the lack of inherent existence. Just like Tsongkhapa says that a farmer, basically, he doesn't say that, but, cause and effect can make you realize lack of autonomy, which makes you realize lack of inherent existence. But we see that a sprout makes corn. So through dependent origination, these things exist. And we see dependent origination of causes and conditions. at the lowest level, farming, dependent origination of wholes and parts, and dependent origination, of mere nominal designation, thought designation on a basis of basis of some sort. So we have to, come to this conclusion somehow that we can find existence tenable and also not inherent existence at the same time. Something can exist but not inherently exist. And this is what we're trying to find our way through, how things could subjectively, conventionally exist through mere imputation, but ultimately not have this. They could subjectively exist, but ultimately not. What is this mere imputation talking about? And this thought designation is enough for Nagarjuna to say this thing exists through dependent origination. This labeling of a basis that has no ness-ness from its own side, has no self-character from its own side, is enough for me to say that chair exists. So when we read the Heart Sutra, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, etc., and I know we're on a lot of different platforms now, I want to make sure that we aren't reading this as, oh, there's no existent I. There's no existent this or that, eye, ear, nose, tongue. There's no existent cessation. There's no Buddha. This thing doesn't exist. And as soon as I figure out that nothing exists, then nothing matters and I'll be liberated. And this is definitely not the view. I repeat, this is a nihilistic view, which is an opponent, which is a view that keeps you bound to cyclic existence. This idea that things don't exist, nothing matters, karma doesn't work, there are no future lives. These are all just ignorances, the ignorance of the law of cause and effect, the ignorance of the nature of reality. So I think it's really important that anytime we can step on ignorance, we're not going to be able to step on all of it. I'm not qualified to be able to, present you the entire, breakdown of all of the differentiations between schools, but there are those who can, and I encourage you to become one of them. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation, there is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. And as we repeat this mantra, remember that this mantra is presenting us with the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. We find all of the 5 Mahayana paths within this, and all of the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. And that Om at the beginning, we imagine the Auma, the Om, the body, speech, and mind, the pure body, speech, and mind of the Buddha that's arrived at Bodhisoha by the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, and path of meditation. And our contaminated Om, body, speech, and mind, Auma, is purified through these pathways. So remember this as we can recite, and then also remembering that these 5 pathways are inherent of existence, are empty of inherent existence, that the practitioner is empty of inherent existence, and so forth. And then you have the, summarized meaning of the perfection of wisdom, the 5 paths that are empty of inherent existence. Teata om gate gate, paragate, parasangati, buddhisoa. 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 We're so fortunate that Khensa Geshe Wandak, so many years ago, taught us, this incredible commentary on by Jayan Gapi Lodru, the first textbook writer for Losaling, to get us to start to understand what this thing's talking about. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, "Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice." When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jibe nejo damba ne ngje de ju ngai du do jen ju babla ma yi bu jin zi ne zong gan jo sa la sha ze lo aga samara ja chanda ra samara be aga samara. Aga samara de janara samara ya be de ata on gate gate parasangati buddhizo papa gonchi sanji gaye de bidoji je lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji dragi baji me de biji danji je dingari so ngere nja je wa da me de ne janandra wa da tomba donji bonzon zonjoji dashi de jandan da de le jo. And we'll make a mandala offering a perfect universe, everyone happy in it. It's beautiful, the most beautiful, happiest place. You see that Buddhas all just want the sentient beings to be free from suffering and to have bliss, to have the removal of afflictive obstructions and restrictions to omniscience. Imagine you're offering this perfect world, almost the result of everyone's practice to the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, the holy beings in the merit field that we imagined before. And don't forget that you're imagining that in the bodhicitta field, you have all sentient beings here as your guests. You're imagining that everyone's making this perfect mandala offering together so that everyone will eventually abide in this perfect mandala. That makes sense, where these beings in the merit field abide. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready. Shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. And then we would make further supplications if we were doing this in relation to the 6 preparations. So we would make this mandala offering, and then, we would make further supplications. May I be able to realize shamatha. May I be able to realize special insight. May I be always ready to abandon attachment for this life, and so forth. Abandon attachment for samsara, abandon attachment to self-centeredness, abandon grasping, as such a Kongan Nimpo's departing from the 4 attachments talks about. So we would make these further supplications when we do the mandala offering at the end of the 6 preparations. I know a class or 2 before we did some of the 6 preparations, so we didn't really finalize it with the 6th. So anyone who's kind of following this with continuity, you can have a little bit more of the picture painted for you each time to be able to fill in your practice with, I hope. And I just want to say thank you so much, because the most I find is that this is so beneficial for my mind, and it allows me to really, really check and see whether this information is saturating well or not, and whether the confidence is there related to it. And it's really inspired me and continues to inspire me. So thank you, all of you. And thank you to Khensa Geshe Wandak for encouraging me and at the end of his life to teach and carry on his Lamrim teachings. Sanje chedan zeji jenan la shanju badu danyi jasuchi dagi chiche jipe sonanji dra penchi sanje jubasho. Sanje chedan zeji jenan la shanju badu danyi jasuchi dagi chiche jipe sonanji dra la penchi sanje jubasho. Sanje chedan zeji jenan la shanju badu danyi jasuchi dagi chiche jipe sonanji dra la penchi sanje jubasho. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. From the end of Nagarjuna's Mulyamadhyamika Karika. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, so we're here today trying to fix, if there is, and we know in the small scope, in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that we've already gone through. We already went through the greatness of the author, greatness of the teaching, how to listen to and explain the instructions, and then how to lead students through the actual instructions. And we've gone through the small scope section where we found out about relying on the teacher and, how to begin to meditate and life of leisure and, what we have, and we should take the essence of it, but we're going to die, and then reflecting on the lower realms and refuge and, karma and the four opponent powers. So we went over this section, and now we're in the medium scope section, and we learned a little bit about what the desire to definitely emerge, what renunciation is. It would be a desire in Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal paths, day and night, seeking transcendent liberation. So you're just day and night. That's all your mind is doing, is seeking liberation in terms of renunciation. So we're learning about, okay, well, mind doesn't do that. Mind day and night does other stuff. So Buddha said there's techniques that will make it so our minds would get to that state. And until our minds get to that state, we won't put in effort. And if we don't put in effort, we're just going to go around like buckets on a water wheel, as Chandrakirti says, through cyclic existence, through among the realms of cyclic existence, through among the, 6, 8, 6, and 3 types of suffering. So that's a problem. When we start to investigate what the sufferings are, they really aren't good. And a lot of them are just empirical realities that no one's going to argue with the Buddha about. Birth, aging, sickness, death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what you want, suffering of mental and physical, appropriated aggregates, makes it a little more fancy. But really, are you going to argue with Buddha about this is the superior truth of suffering in a very coarse way? Are you going to? I don't think so. When we get separated from things that we love, Buddha said that all relationships end in separations one way or another. Is that true? Death, or I don't like you anymore, or you don't like me anymore. What is that? Do you always get what you want? How many things have you worked so hard for to get and you don't get what you want? You're going to argue with Buddha about that? And that's what's so convincing about this material. No one is saying to you, you have to believe this because it's the way that it is. And there's no way for you to discover it. The Buddha is saying that this is the way that it is. Here's how I discovered it. Now you discover it. It's this discoverable truth. It's not something that externally is just going to tell us the way it is and make us the way they want to. It's a truth that we'll discover for ourselves and be able to, because we have Buddha nature, because our mind is unsullied in the nature of clear light, take this truth all the way to Buddhahood. And we don't have to just believe it, because they would never put in effort. We would never just believe anything enough. It's really going to take a lot for us to do what it's going to take to fight something that naturally appears to us as inherently existent and always has. So we're going to really, really need a lot of chutzpah, a lot of kind of reason to go on this quest to start harming, as the great authors talk about, self-cherishing, harming self-grasping. Okay. So now we're in the section on the 6 sufferings, and Lama Tsongkhapa uses Nagarjuna's letter to a friend in the terms of the main quotes that are used. And Nagarjuna's letter to a friend was written to a king, King Udayi Bhadra. There's probably people on right now who are cringing. King Udayi Bhadra. Okay, so he's a king, and Nagarjuna said that, you know, kings are busy and they need some kind of concise instructions how to achieve high status, higher realm rebirth. We find in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland the 16 virtues for developing this high status and how to achieve certain goodness. Because Sakya Randawa says that other systems just don't tell you how to do it. They don't. They only tell you how to suffer in the end. Ooh. So it's pretty strong words, but you'll find this in the tenet systems in Gonja Jimmy Wambo's, defining, Buddhist and non-Buddhist. It gets a little rough in there. I encourage you to check that out. Cutting Through Appearances is translated a long time ago. You can see definitions and so forth, and then see what you think of that, right? Nobody's babies around here. Just see, does that tally with reality or not? And then try to prove it wrong, because we're trying to prove that the I inherently exists. And when we find that it doesn't, then we have to concede. So the Buddha, Arya Nagarjuna, sometimes called second Buddha, because there's 3 specific kind of turnings or events that are compared to the 3 turnings of Lord Buddha. We won't get into this, but this Precious Garland goes over these 6 sufferings. They're numbered as 7. Nagarjuna talks about 7 sufferings, but what's kind of interesting, I was thinking about this morning, is the 7th suffering is like specific sufferings, sufferings of the lower and higher realms, and it's enumerated as 5 sufferings because we know in the Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Kosha, that we find 5 divisions, and the demigods and gods are together in one division. So Nagarjuna says the 6 sufferings, and in the 6 sufferings, there's a lot about, we're going to read about it, about this circle that's going on in the realms. And Nagarjuna chooses to then explain these realms you end up in after the kind of details that go on in them at a general way. So there's general presentation in Nagarjuna is giving with the 6 sufferings, and then specific in terms of the 5 realms. And it's kind of cool because Lama Tsongkhapa does the same thing, even though in the small scope, we find the lower realms in specifics about the lower realms. We find the specifics about the higher realms after the generals about the 6 sufferings. So anybody who's really following this train ride, the weaving train ride, can see. And it's neat to see how much Lama Tsongkhapa added. When we're looking, I'm sorry, I didn't even mention this part. I'm looking at Sakya Randawa's commentary also at the same time. Very, very short commentary. It's in English. And I was looking at it in Tibetan and speaking with a Loseling, Drepung Loseling Umzala Geshe Aga about some of it this morning. It's just such a wonderful little short, concise thing. And it's interesting to see how much Lama Tsongkhapa chooses just to kind of cut and paste, especially the first suffering of uncertainty. It's interesting when you start to see the relationship. Sakya Randawa was, of course, Lama Tsongkhapa's teacher. A lot of, Sakya lineage would say that there's no Galupa, it's Sakya. The others would differ. Poor Bhutan Rinchen Drup's lineage also gets thrown in there. But who knows? I don't swim in those scholar waters, but you hear things, you hear stuff. So Nagarjuna's friendly letter to a friend, is what Lama Tsongkhapa chooses as his basis for explaining the 6 types of suffering. So it's just such a beautiful presentation that I think it's really important that we go over it. And what I thought was really neat, that in the beginning of Sakya Randawa's commentary, it says this, the Nagarjuna stanza below it is, gentle sir. This isn't about the six sufferings, but it's just the same chapter where it occurs, fourth chapter of Randhawa's commentaries. The king is addressed as gentle sir. Gentle sir, become disgusted with samsara, source of so much suffering, material privation, death, illness, aging, and the like. Here now further a few of its faults. So 8 sufferings, you could almost say, are right in there. And, let me talk to you about more of why you should day and night want to seek transcendent liberation. The king is addressed as gentle sir because it's the source of so much suffering, the lack of material goods, food, clothing, and so forth, and ultimate death, occasional occurrences of illnesses and aging, the disappearance of youthful vigor, and such forms of misery as grief and outcries of anguish. One must develop aversion for samsara. If one does not turn away from this samsara, the desire for liberation will not arise. This is what we've been talking about. The author indicates that he will mention a few of the defects of samsara, only a partial explanation. So there's a lot more problems with samsara to aid the arising of this attitude of renunciation. Therefore, one should give heed. The faults of samsara could never be stated in their entirety, yet hearing of even a portion of them is enough to cause the mind to renounce it. Thus, a part of the faults is next presented in 7 divisions. So then we get to the 6 sufferings, and then this added, the specific sufferings of the 5 realms. And then we start with this fault of uncertainty. And it's kind of neat, because when we look at meditating on emptiness, and we look at all of these reasons we use, it's not inherently one where they're separate from. But it says, the teachers say that there's, one of those reasons, or we have 20 emptinesses, somewhere in there, something's going to jar you, they say. Something's going to go, whoa, jar you. Chandrakirti, talks about almost physical things that if you're ripe and ready with emptiness, that happen, that shake, create an earthquake of samsara, So here we have similar things that, the great lamas say, that we have 8 sufferings, 6 suffering, 3 suffering, meditate on each of them. This is all within the truth of suffering, coarse and subtle level. Meditate on all of them. Find out the mastermind behind all of it is pervasive compounded suffering. But something in that 8, 6, 3 is going to jar your mind. And everyone doesn't get jarred by the same facts. So when you're doing glancing meditation, Shargom, you're using these facts and seeing if they rock you, basically. And the great scholars want to rock you with kind of things like, it's uncertain. You're going to marry your mom and your kid's going to be your wife in future lives. Your enemy, you're going to fall in love with them. And this is the uncertainty. So let's read Lama Tsongkhapa now. And then at the beginning, it says reflections on the 6 types of suffering. Lama Tsongkhapa clarifies and says, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know because in the clear words by Mahamati, in the explanation of Letter to a Friend, he says, there are 7 types of suffering. Since the last merely restates such of each of the faults, you should contemplate 6 here. So just read that just to read it. So the first, fault of uncertainty. As you pass through cyclical existence, close relatives such as your father and mother become your enemies in other lifetimes. So, and then Pabunka would probably take it a step further and say, then you're going to chop off the head of your wife. Just don't forget that, you love them so much. Just so you know that there's going to be a crime committed if you don't stop this murderer inside of you that's going to murder in your future life your wife, your mother, your father that you think of so strongly. You're going to see them as something else in the future. And this uncertainty, quite frankly, sucks. As you pass through cyclic existence, close relatives such as your father and mother become enemies in other lifetimes, while enemies become close relatives. Similarly, your father becomes your son, and your son becomes your father, and your mother becomes your wife, and your wife your mother. Since there's nothing but a succession of such transformations, there's nothing that you can count on. So can I count on this love? I might murder you. I'm going to have children with my mother. can I count on these relationships? And this is hoping to, once we've started to believe in this beginningless consciousness more and more and more, these things become more effective. This isn't effective if you haven't meditated on previous lives. It's not as effective. Maybe you have a correctly assuming consciousness. Yeah, I think there's previous lives. I think I was like in a Revolutionary War. Everybody seemed to have been or something like this. It's just funny when you hear about this. Anyway, you get my drift if you've been around for a while. So there's nothing you can count on. So now we're going to quote Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, Shiting. For those in cyclic existence, there are no certainties, because fathers become sons, mothers become wives, enemies become friends, and the converse happens as well. And then we find, even in this life, enemies become friends and vice versa. Now we're in Tsongkhapa's commentary. And then he quotes the Tantra requested by Sabahu. And anybody who's paying attention, this is where we find qualities of the teacher also that Tisha and commentators say we can apply to. We find these qualities of spiritual friend that are presented. And then like friends, that we have spiritually in our lives. And then we can apply these qualities that friends we should keep around us to the Lama, if you remember. So we have the 10 qualities of the Lama in the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, ornament from Mahayana Sutra. And then we have the sutra, the Tantra requested by Sabahu, that lists more qualities that Atisha and commentators say you can apply to your actual guru, to your teacher, to have these qualities. So slight digression, but I see, Tantra requested by Sabahu. We've heard about this. We heard about this when we were going on in the section of relying on the spiritual friend, and these qualities that are, another text that shows qualities besides the Dodijin. So here, this is in relation, of course, to the fault of uncertainty of cyclic existence. The Tantra requested by Sabahu says, within a short space of time, an enemy can become a friend, and a friend can become an enemy. Likewise, either one may become indifferent, while those who are indifferent may become enemies or intimate friends. Knowing this, the wise never form attachments. They give up the thought of delighting in friends and are content to focus on virtue. By meditating on this, you should check the arising of the attachment and hostility that come from discriminating between friends and enemies. Be aware that among the phenomena of cyclic existence, absolutely nothing can be trusted. Become disenchanted. And then last week, I know we read this, and we saw how here we're forming a good foundation for the pre-step for the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So cool. Right in the medium scope, we're learning how to get...
Right here.
So we're really so fortunate that Lama Tsongkhapa is maturing our minds in such a kind way. We're that we can start to see this, begin to see how we could equally be willing to benefit if these relationships can't be trusted, and we've had all of these varying things occur. And when we look at the, pre-step for the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment of equanimity, we start with, start to see, how our mind is in relation to neutrals, and realize that we've had every relationship with them, and then loved ones, and then enemies. And we come to find out that nothing can be trusted, and that, these relationships can't be. And then this turns into a platform for, I would be equally willing to benefit them, since there's not this stability that I...
People coming in.
So it's really interesting. Can everybody mute, please? So it's really interesting to see how kind Lama Tsongkhapa is to really set us up. To this disenchantment comes out of this idea of uncertainty, but this neutrality, this kind of equanimity, this equal willingness to benefit, comes from this step as well. If we start to see how all of these things are instructions for practice, there's nothing contradictory. We're easily understanding what the intention of the Buddha is, and that we'll abandon any of these kind of bad ideas of abandoning the Dharma. These 4 qualities, greatness of the Dharma, we see them as, if we're really looking close enough, we are going to see them again and again and again. Okay, then we get into the fault of uncertainty. So we went over that, shocker, the uncertainty before. So now, I'm sorry. So now we get into the fault of insatiability. And here there's a whole lot more information Lama Tsongkhapa gives us than we find in Sakya Randawa's commentary. And one thing that's interesting, Sakya Randawa talks about the uncertainty and says that until you have the liberating paths, this paths of emptiness, you just definitely have more, tons of this to come. The only thing that makes sure that you have less of this to come is a liberating path. If you want less of this to come, not more of this to come, then you need a liberating path. So the friendly letter, so now the fault of insatiability. Each of us has drunk more milk than would ever fill the four oceans. Yet those in cyclic existence who act as ordinary beings are intent on drinking still more of that. So we've done this over and over and over again. We're never satisfied, no matter how much we have, no matter what it is. We can have everything that we want and we're still not satisfied. This is the disgusting thing about where we're at. We have this suffering of change, this contaminated suffering. The object that we get pulled to is contaminated, so it's not going to give us what we think it will, this permanent unitary, this permanent happiness, that it has the value, has the ability to throw at us from its own side. It's throwing our ability to be fulfilled at us. And that's what meditation on emptiness is for, is to lessen this attachment and hatred, because you're starting to see that this thing it's throwing nothing at us. I'm throwing everything at it to make it it, but it still exists because I made it just having fun. It's sometimes just so silly when you break it down to like the silliness of 20 emptinesses, and just kind of say it in like a simple way. Not that the simple way is enough, but it's funny after you've studied for a long time and you hear simple things, and they sometimes mean more than just stacks of things that you read before. So this is the beauty of the evolution, right, of studies and so forth, and I'll keep coming because of that. And so it says, think about it. Think about it. This isn't just like, oh, this. It says, now think about it. Engage in analytical meditation. I told you, kind of how to do that a little bit already in the beginning of the text, and meditation session, and abandoning wrong ideas about meditation. I told you how to think about it, Lama Tsongkhapa said. I told you what thinking about it means. It means that you're going to tell your mind what to do. Now you're telling your mind what to do for the first time, and you're going to say, okay, I'm going to tell my mind to think about this idea that I'm never satisfied, and I've just been cycling again and again and again. So it says, each living being has drunk so much mother's milk in the past, and yet without training on a path to liberation, you will drink that much again in the future. So here again, liberating paths. The only thing that will free you from samsara is a liberating path. Ripening paths are needed to be as a concomitant, almost the wind that blows you the direction. If it's just renunciation, it'll blow you to an abiding nirvana. If it's just, if it's bodhicitta, with a basis of renunciation and of course concentration, it'll blow you to Buddhahood when either of those are combined with this liberating path. So those are ripening paths, the renunciation, bodhicitta, all these other things. But the emptiness, this wisdom, is the liberating path. And without it, you get nada, nothing. No abiding nirvana here, solitary realizer. No non-abiding nirvana of the Buddha. You get nada without realizing emptiness. And you can't just realize partial emptiness. You can have a yogic direct perception of just the selflessness of person, lack of an autonomous, substantial, self of person. You can have a yogic direct perception of that. That is not a liberating path. There are contaminated yogic direct perceptions. What? This is just an example. When you reflect on how you have no lack of experience with the wonders and sufferings of cyclic existence, you should become disenchanted. You indulge in pleasures in pursuit of satisfaction, yet with worldly pleasures, you're never satisfied no matter how much you enjoy them. Hence, time after time, your craving grows, and on that account, you wander for ages through cyclic existence. For an immeasurably long period of time, you will experience intolerable suffering, which those pleasures will not ameliorate in the least. As Geshe Dorje Damdu said, one tragedy wipes away a decade of happiness. You were just, say you were blissed out having a great time, throw tragedy in front of you and see if those things are good enough to not make you sink into a just dark depression, feeling just lost and empty. See if all of those pleasures you had are enough to make you say, this doesn't matter because I had all those pleasures. One moment of just awfulness just makes all those pleasures just matter and not matter in the least. Then the friendly letter says, so quoting a different section to kind of, strengthen this stanza about the second suffering of this among the six. Just as a leper tormented by maggots turns to fire for relief but finds no peace, so should you understand attachment to sensual pleasures. Just turning to more suffering for relief. It doesn't take it away. Just turning to more suffering, turning to another nicer car for more relief. But that thing is the suffering contaminated. It doesn't have any qualities that I think that it does. So I'm chasing after something to make me happy that can't do it over and over and over again. Over and over again, I think it's going to work. And then I get the thing, and then I've got it, and now the chase is over. And now it's, my peak of I got it starts to go, I got it, this old thing. Man, this old thing, I hope I can get something new because this thing really, now this car I thought was so great, it's broken now. I need a new car to make me happy because this thing that I thought inherently existed and was going to be the thing that did it, once again, let me down. And also in the Compendium of Perfections, it is said, you get what you want, use it up, then acquire more, and still you're not satisfied. What could be sicker than this? When we look at how the student's supposed to sit at a teaching, you start to think first, these 6 things you're supposed to think of in the beginning of the Lam Rim, how to listen to a teaching. I am ill. And here's more confirmation. No matter what I get, I think it's going to make me happy. And then I'm not satisfied when I get it. I'm sure this thing's going to work. And then I get it and I'm not satisfied. What is crazier than this? This sleep of ignorance is really, really messed up. So anyway, we'll read Chandra Goman's letter to a student because we're not going to finish. We won't finish 2 today. It's okay though, because we just have to keep going persistent, over having perseverance, persistence, doing this stuff, reading it, meditating on it. And eventually it'll really start to saturate our minds because I've seen it. I've sat next to Khyentse Geshe Wandak for 25 years and I saw it saturated his mind when I picked him up in Ithaca, or even the first teaching in 97 before that. But I started to be really personally connected to him. I saw the Dharma saturated his mind then. And then the last moment that we spoke in the hospital, I saw the mind saturated his Dharma. His mind was saturated with the Dharma. And there was no difference in his enjoying a pleasant car ride and dying. I'm getting chills. No difference to a bodhisattva. Big difference to me. And when he left, it was a big difference, that car ride and him dying. But no difference for him, that delightful car ride and dying. So fortunate to have been touched by these holy bodhisattvas like Khyentse Geshe Wandak, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Lobsang Gompo. Demolocha Rinpoche, Khenser Lobsang Gyatso. Now we still have Gen Paldendrapa Rinpoche in our world. That generation, Khenser Pema Jetson and Zong Rinpoche and Ling Rinpoche and Trijung Rinpoche, that we're part of the family of. We're so fortunate. We're so fortunate. We hear about these teachers like they're just these fantasy figures, but we're so connected to them. Rinpoche received teachings directly from Pabonka Rinpoche's student, received teachings directly from these holy lamas. You know, Pabonka Rinpoche, Dapa Rinpoche, his teacher, directly with Tara, wrote Tara, you know, practices because he was with her. This is the family we are part of. This is how fortunate we are. We say Pension Son Andrapa Basu Chichi Jetson, you know, Janja Rilbi Dorje and Purbajo and Jitsumba, Giant Sheva. We say all these incredible names and we're so connected to them and they clarify these things for us. But it's not like they're holding on to something that we can't discover. They're telling us how to discover it for ourselves. You know, the Buddha doesn't wash away negativities of beings, doesn't remove miseries with hands. Spiritual realizations aren't transferred. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We're so fortunate that people have been so compassionate and kind, and beings come here to teach us the truth of suchness. So we have a way out of the truth of suffering and a way to get rid of the self-cherishing attitude at its subtle level that's left over, even once the gross self-cherishing attitude is done with for a Hinayana Arhat. They still have, even though the gross self-cherishing is gone because they've, you know, they're in nirvana and they've gotten, you know, this pure view of selflessness of person and phenomena, they still have these imprints of the subtle self-cherishing attitude that has to be gotten rid of. And we're fortunate. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but we're fortunate that we have the keys to get rid of all of those things that keep us from our all beings goal. I want to never suffer again, and I want as much happiness as possible. Well, then you want to be a Buddha. There's no one else who gets that. That's it. One kind of being, one woken up being gets that. That's it. You want that? You can get it. But there's only one kind of being with perfect wisdom, perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, and perfect power. You know, the conqueror who has conquered the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. And you can become that kind of being. You won't become Buddha Shakyamuni, but you'll have exactly the same qualities of no negativities and only incredible things. Prayer for the flourishing of Jitsun Kappa's teachings. And if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. And if there's grasping, you do not have the view. Manjushri was so kind to teach that to a young child so we can understand Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal paths in 4 lines and understand the whole Lamrim Chemo. And, you know, implicitly, if we want to get fancy, Ngarim Chemo in 4 lines. So we're really lucky. Prayer for the flourishing of Jitsun Kappa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Endraketu, he made his vow, the conqueror and his offspring praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. That the lineage of pure view and conduct might spread, he offered a white crystal rosary to the sage, who gave him a conch and prophesied, through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. His pure view, free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation, cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct praised according to the conqueror's orders. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Learned, since he extensively sought out learning, reverent, rightly applying it to himself. Good, dedicating all for beings in doctrine, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice from one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Listening to the explanations of the 3 Pitakas, realized teachings, practice of the 3 highest higher trainings, his skill and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the 2 stages practice, he allied without clash the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss, achieved by method, the effect vehicle, hard essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the three beings paths, the quick-acting Lord Vaishravana Karmayana, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of power of its patrons, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. And I really appreciate you so much, all of you, for, Rinpoche could say, Jeff, you should teach, but if there's no students to listen, then how will I get this merit? How will I clarify these things in my mind out loud without your participation? And I just want to say, I really feel so grateful for all of you. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Now, again, while we're doing this, you're always imagining that all sentient beings are here as your guests. And I'm imagining, the same thing. That I'm in the language of all, trying my best to think like this. So eventually I could become a bodhisattva. I'd have the things in my mind that would help to ripen that, result, through the 7-point cause and effect, equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, the combination of them, through these practices and through like the pre-steps of pretending, really, really pretending, among each of them, we will eventually become bodhisattvas. And that's the only way, the only entrance to the Mahayana is bodhicitta. We learn that when we study Panchen Sanandrapa's general meaning of perfection in those 5 incredible categories of the Senche Kato. Okay. Fundamental ground is,
I already did that.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought I said it right when I said it. I was looking at the page. I knew I already did that. I was like, shall we do it again? Should I just keep going with it? So you're imagining all beings, where we left off, you're imagining all beings, part of your bodhicitta field. And now imagine that Vajrasattva is in space in front of you, inseparable from your Lupa Lama. I apologize for any mistakes that I've made. They were unintentional. Anything that came into your ears, may they be purified, and may yours and mine and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind, be purified with this mantra, imagining Vajrasattva in the space in front of you, inseparable from your root Lama, and imagining that light rays and nectars are showering down on you and all sentient beings, transforming into white Oms, red Ahs, and blue Hums, and purifying yours and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind, respectively. So with the power of this mantra, may this purification take place. Om Benzazata Zamaya Manibalaya Benzazata Zena Vajita Meva Vazulukaya Meva Vazubukaya Meva Anurag Meva Zavazini Meva Savakama Suchi Mekitam Shiam Kuruhum Ha Bhagavan Savatata Kata Benzama Memoka Benza Bava Maha Samaya Sapa Ahum Be. May we always be protected by Paul Lama, who Rinpoche said is our protector deity. Jarama 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 Tinjakalar Rama Jadaja Junjarang Yong 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 Jarama 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 Dunjo Galarajemo Ramo Ajadaja Dunjo Rilla Many obstacles you may have on these applications to meeting with the Dharma be removed from the mantra of Drapo Sundri. Om Vajrapani Haya Griva Garuda Om Ved. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May Lord Chenrezig please remain in our world. He says he's got at least 20 more years. So please, may this be so, and may my karma allow me to never, ever separate from Chenrezig. In the Pure Land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara. Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And then we'll end with a supplication to Khensur Geshe Wandak, Rinpoche that I wrote on March 6, 2023, 1 year after his passing. I began writing it in 1998 as a long life prayer that others thought was too long. And then it became a supplication prayer after he passed. This was written on March 6, 2023. It's entitled A Complex Yogi Poses as a Simple Monk. Homage to Kensur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them as by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you all listening. I also got to experience, between those who know, what Roy Lee got to have a terror panic with about 20-something years ago. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you all next time. I hope this was helpful, and may your mind be virtuous every moment.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. We'll see you all later.